she'll explain about the 10 years of success we had. I'd like to congratulate the organizers of this expo, especially Helen Blunts and Toby Walters for inviting me and providing this opportunity to moderate. Nearly 30 million passengers are projected to experience the cruise ship travel in 2019. Just think about it. That is 5 times or 6 times the population of Miami. And even more, $45 billion are expended in wages and salaries for cruise ship employees. According to a report from the Cruise Lines International Association, we are seeing new trends. For example, experience beyond just mere sightseeing, wellness and restoration. Younger generation is wanting more Instagrammable experiences. People are looking for conscious and meaningful travel, and more access to exotic locations. We are also seeing new and emerging demographics, including increase in female travelers. Generation Z, the younger generation, is on board. Working nomads, people who want to work on ship and travel the world, and even solo travelers. So at such an exciting time for the cruise ship industry, the global cruise order book is naturally showing a very strong increase in new build vessels as well as refurbishments. And the industry is experiencing a squeeze of capacity at shipyards and outfitters. Thereby, there's also a high demand for materials and labor. We hope that our expert panel here will share their views on the current state of the industry and identify challenges and opportunities. We are very grateful. They'll be coming from a big picture perspective, not so much into the deep dives, which we hope other pieces of the conference will cover. The panel format is very simple. We have 50 minutes at our disposal. I'll start with some basic questions, and we'll keep the discussion very spontaneous and unscripted. As I understand, my job as a moderator is to get out of the way. We'll also have some time at the end, about 10 minutes, for audience questions. So without further ado, let me very quickly introduce the panel. We have Stephen Fryers. Stephen, please be recognized. Stephen is a consultant for Royal Caribbean Cruises. Having 20 years of experience in the cruise industry, Stephen has worked on new build, refurbishment, and major conversion projects for some of the world's leading cruise lines. With degrees in architecture and project management, Stephen has lived and worked internationally, including Hong Kong, Australia, and Italy. Please welcome Stephen Fryers. Next, we have Colin Gant. Colin is the Vice President of Vessel Refurbishment at Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings.
Yeah.
At Norwegian, Colin has conducted more than 30 vessel refits, totaling over $500 million. Previously, he held leadership roles in Carnival Cruise Lines and served as a surface welfare officer in the US Navy. Colin holds degrees from Wharton School of Management and the University of Miami. Please welcome Colin Gant. Next, we have Petu Kummala. Petu is the Senior Director, Interior Design and Architecture for Carnival Cruise Line. Kummala was recruited to Carnival Cruises by the legendary designer Joe Farkas. After working on 17 Carnival, 9 Costa, and a few other ships, he launched 358 Design, which he still operates. As he continues to combine inspiration with innovation, Petu is guided by a very personal philosophy. Quote, "If I can give passengers something new to discover every day, I've created a successful design." Please welcome Petu Kummala.
Thanks.
Next, we have George Scammell. George is the Director of Interior Design and Operations for Holland America Group, serving Princess Cruises. George's leadership positions include VP of Global Design for Wyndham Worldwide, Principal for Core Architects, VP of Design for Forrest Perkins, and design management for Walt Disney World Resorts. He's responsible for design, revitalization, refurbishment, and maintenance for Princess Fleet of 17 international ships. Please welcome George Scammell.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Trevor Young. Trevor is the Vice President of New Building and Refurbishment for MSC Cruises. He's currently coordinating 13 new building projects of MSC Cruises' fleet expansion plan. He also coordinates all refurbishment projects in the company's existing fleet. Trevor's career started with him earning a diploma of business and hospitality management, along with a certificate in hotel and catering management, which led him to the cruise industry in 1996. Please welcome Trevor Young. Sorry, I went very quickly there. These are all very distinguished persons, so sorry for briefing your big bios. So we will start by assessing the state of the cruise ship industry, and I'll pose a question to Stephen Fryers first, and then the rest of the panel will jump in. So the question would be, what does the new build order look like for the near and midterm future? Steve?
Thank you. I think that's a very good question. The industry at this moment is, to use a word I think is buoyant. There's, I think the last I looked, 124 ships on order going through to 2027. As you said, I've been in this industry 20 years. I've never seen an order book like this going as far into the future. And it's not just your standard cruise ships that we're looking at now. We're looking at expedition vessels have become very popular recently. And there's also, I believe, 21 new players coming into the industry, setting up new cruise lines. So I think, as a whole, we should be very happy that we're in this industry at this moment in time. It's, the future looks very good and positive.
Anybody else want to pitch in?
Oh, no, I mean, I totally agree. I checked, actually. I usually don't check things, but by the end of 2020, I think there's 98 ships delivered. So that's 2.5 years from now. Right. And like you said, there's so many different types, you know, from all various and new companies coming in as well. So that's just, as a whole, cruise industry, it's awesome. Yeah. It really is
I think the order book value is, what, 68 billion?
Yeah, it's kind of nuts. But I mean, if you think about it as a leisure industry, it's still 5-6% of the leisure industry as a whole. So I think there's room for growth. I hope there's room for growth.
There must be room for growth. If you look at the number of passengers that we have, 20, 30 million a year now. If you look at it in the global context of people taking vacations of 1.8 billion, I understand, a year. Yeah. We're minute, so the opportunities are huge.
Yeah. I think we are, as an industry, percentage-wise of the global tourism industry, we're only about 1.6%, which, if you think about that, it's minute in comparison to the other travel opportunities and chances that people have to be able to take a vacation.
And the exciting thing is all the new players coming into the market. Yes. So, of course, we're all from existing cruise lines, but with Virgin and Ritz-Carlton and so on, and all these other new people that are bringing even more customers to the cruise market that would normally try it. So I think it's really exciting, and the potential is huge.
Oh, yeah, completely agree. Yeah.
The only thing I would add is I'd say it's, from a refurbishment standpoint, I think it's exciting when you see so many new ships coming on the market as well, because ultimately all those ships are going to go to dry dock, and ultimately they're all going to get refurbished as well. So it's growth in new building, and it's growth in parallel for the refurbishment market. And unfortunately, they're kind of leaning on the same resources. I think that's going to be talked on a little bit later, but it's an interesting dynamic.
We just need to make sure that people don't break the docks. Yes. You know.
Yes.
Kind of a problem.
You know, that's an interesting thing in the idea of branding, because now I think there's more and more focus on branding as you're having to differentiate between all the different cruise lines, and we're starting to see that more and more.
And it just brings more awareness of the cruise industry as a whole, and things like, you know, Virgin, not so different people look at cruise industry differently, as it should. I mean, it's not like what it was 15, 20 years ago. It's completely different.
I think the diversity with the order book that you see of the new players coming in shows a maturity of the industry. You know, as an industry that's just over 40 years old, I think we're now seeing that trend of those that have early cruisers in the 40 years plus ago who are now mature and looking for a different type of cruise. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot more diversity and opportunities with other players coming into the market.
Because they're focusing on their own individual market. So instead of a lot of our ships are one size fits all, we try to cover 2 or 3 different demographics on the one ship. Now you're starting to see a lot more ships which are focused on one demographic only, and that is very refreshing.
Yeah.
So Trevor, would you want to now expand on the refurbishment side of the cruise ship industry?
Well, maybe Colin could jump in on
Colin.
this one as well,
Right.
but it's the potential is huge as well, of course, because as there's so many new builds coming into play at the moment, and everyone has their existing fleet like we do at MSC, we have to keep those existing fleets current. And of course, all the new builds have got all new ideas and new stimulus and new things that the older ships don't have. So then we have to work out how we can then update those older ships to bring them up to the new ideas that we have in our current vessels. So that's a very big, huge challenge. Obviously, it's very expensive as well, but it's something that we have to do. Continual investment is a priority for all of us.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would say if you have a brand and you have an identity and you have a new ship that comes out, you kind of set a new standard, right? And when you establish that standard, then you have to make sure that that standard is continued throughout the rest of the brand. And what you have is again, it's got a lot of names, but we call it harmonization, right? Harmonization of your existing fleet with your newer hardware as it comes on the market. You have new restaurants, you have new guest amenities, whether it be water parks, ropes courses, go-kart tracks, all sorts of things. They put tremendous strain and pressure on the older hardware to keep up with those things. And you see it across the brands. You see it certainly with us. You see it with Royal. You see it with Carnival, Holland, MSC. You see it everywhere. Everybody has this pursuit of making sure that the older hardware does not get left behind as you have so much new ships coming online.
We were already right away asked, once we introduced Mardi Gras, that, okay, so will the 30-year-old ships have a roller coaster now on them?
Yeah.
It's like, well, we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's pretty critical that there's the good synergies between the renovations team and the new build teams, and making sure that we're sharing those ideas and the concepts and finding out where those directions are going, so that as we look at our existing fleet, we're able to start to incorporate those items so that as those new ships come out, it's not a shock to our guest system, that there's still the consistencies of the brand, especially as it's evolving.
Yeah, you can't abandon the old fleet when you bring something new. I mean, it's still as valid as the new
I think
one.
that's to your point there, nobody is getting rid of the older tonnage now. Used to be when newer ships came out, they would recycle out the older tonnage. That's not happening now. They are repurposing the vessels and spending huge sums of money to modernize these vessels in order to keep them going, and are sending them to newer markets also after they have been refurbishment.
Yeah, I mean, our oldest is 30 years old, and we're doing big job on them, and they're very popular still with guests, and the yield is tremendous.
Well, I think what's driving new build is the demand. We've got the guests to fill it.
Yeah.
So we need those
Yeah,
ships.
we need more capacity, not to get rid of
You
the
need
old
more capacity, so we end up having to stretch them, the older ships.
Yeah, sure.
As
They
well.
were not built to be that old, but they're still here, and they're
Yeah.
still very valid. Plus size-wise too. Big ships are coming in, so you need the smaller ones so you can go to different ports.
And that's the exciting thing as well. Like with the smaller ships, is getting to ports that you can't normally go to, because the bigger ships obviously have an area that they can, or ports that they can go to, but the smaller ones can go a lot more places.
Yeah.
So we're building luxury ships now, and we're so focused on obviously the ports that we can go to that we're putting 6 tenders on them, so that we have that flexibility to do what we need to do.
But it's an interesting point. I mean, again, you guys have pretty much covered it for the most part, but the diversity of ports and the requirement to have different types of hardware to go to those ports. And I think the other question that kind of follows in line with that is the fact that we are building so many new ships, and we do have so many existing ships out there as well. Port planning and itinerary planning in parallel has become a much more complicated exercise than it was in the past. And you see that across the board with all the brands, and that's kind of driving a lot of other elements as well. Getting a little bit off topic, but you have the islands that everybody is working on and all sorts of other amenities that are driving new destinations to support all the ships that you have.
Look at
sailing out
Miami.
there.
Everyone's building terminals. We've just announced ours in another conference earlier this year.
Yeah. We had touched upon it briefly as we were getting mic'd up there, but with the LNG ships coming in, that also creates another issue for the industry in the supply of the LNG to the vessels. It's still at this moment, there's limited areas where LNG is readily available.
Yeah.
So that is going to be a challenge for the LNG ships that are coming out, of which I think there's about 20 plus on the order books at this moment.
We have
that
5.
are yep. So
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, we've got 5 coming out in the next 6 years.
yeah. So
But the LNG issue, I think I always equate it to the A380 aircraft. All the airports modernized. Eventually they caught up, and now everybody, all the major airports take A380s as a normal thing.
Yeah.
LNG will be the same.
Yeah.
But
I would
it's
agree.
just at the
I
interim,
think at
it's
this
hard.
moment,
Yeah.
though, it's still one of those things that you're limited to where you can go. But I think, yes, build it and they will come, I think is the adage of that one.
That's for sure.
That's a good segue into capacity issues. So, Colin, if you can take the question of capacity and how shipyards are responding to it in terms of infrastructure and staffing.
Okay. Well, I think there are 2 parts to that question for shipyard capacity. I think one, you've got new building, right, which is kind of its own environment. You've got the new building. I'm going to put that to the side for a moment because I think we have Trevor and some other guys who can talk about new building a little bit more, focusing more on the refit side in terms of shipyard capacity. I think there are two things to keep in mind with shipyard capacity. First is you've got to have physical space, an actual dock to put the ship, right? You have to also then have the time available for however long you need to dock the vessel. But then in parallel to that, having a dock space is not adequate. That isn't the answer that you need. You actually need the infrastructure within the yard and the experience within the yard. And the shipbuilding capacity in the yard in a lot of instances, depending on the scale of refit you're doing, if you're adding new blocks, if you're doing a ducktail, if you're doing a lengthening, only certain shipyards have the credentials and the expertise to actually execute that sort of work. So just having physically a dock doesn't necessarily mean that you have the ability to be able to execute the project you need. And so that really drives the capacity shortage, let's say, in terms of shipyards. And I think there are a lot of telltale signs out there right now in the industry that you see. A couple of things that I would say are pretty obvious is the fact that a lot of cruise lines now, it used to be you would let the itinerary drive where the dry dock would be, right? Now you see the dry dock driving the itinerary. And that's something that you would never have seen years ago. Another thing you see is dry docks in June, right? I mean, a couple of years ago, did you ever see ships dry dock in June? I can't recall it. It's definitely a recent phenomenon. And again, I think this all kind of fits into that discussion of ships. It's math. It's basic math. We're getting more ships. It means we have more dry docks. It means that you need to extend the window. You either need to make more dry docks available, or you need to extend the window of time that people actually dry dock the vessels. Anyway, those are my thoughts on capacity. I would say those are the major factors that come to mind.
And the manpower too, and that goes hand in hand with new build and refurb. Just the contractors and the yards. Even if you have space, if you don't have people, then there's a shortage of people who work on them. So it's all across the board.
And not just the people; it's also the supplier base.
Yeah.
It's the same supplier base for the refurbishments as it is for the new build.
Yeah.
And they are challenged in order to keep up with the capacity. You can see that with the contractors that I've worked with, struggling to get certain items. I mean, you take doors, you rock along to a door supplier and ask for 4 doors, and he goes, yeah, but he needs 4,000. Where do you think you are in the supply list there? You're pretty low in the totem pole for it. So
But with
it's a
the
challenge.
with the shipyards, of course, we all know there's the 4 major shipyards. In the last 5 to 10 years, they're all basically doubled their capacity. So you look at
Yeah.
Meyerwerft. When I started working with them in the 90s, they would deliver 1 ship a year. Now they can deliver 3, 2 large and a small, what we call a small, up to 95,000 tons a day, so, which is quite strange. But you look at France, they can do 2 mega ships a year. Finland are building up to 2 a year. And of course Italy, 2 or 3, because they've got so many different yards and so on. So the capacity has increased a lot. Then you look, there's new players in the market. Genting, for example, have bought their own shipyards and building their own ships. So that'll be an interesting to see how that works. And then, of course, all the smaller shipyards are, when we say smaller, up to 60, 70, 80,000 tons. They're all now busy. So if you look 10 years ago, the order book wasn't that good, and the shipyards were 3, 4 years out. There'd be 1, 2 ships, and now all shipyards are full until 25, 26. You can't get a slot for a major ship until 27, 28, which is unheard of. So we're all in retirement jobs if we want to.
Yeah, that is the big deal. You got to look so far ahead, and it drives the ship size sometimes too, where you can get in.
Exactly.
It's
I think
definitely.
also if you look at some of the shipyards that are now being used, traditionally were never shipbuilders in the sense of cruise ships. There is such a demand, and the size of the ships that the smaller vessels, especially, maybe the Fincantieri's of this world, etc., aren't that interested in them because they're so small. But the operators are going to yards that traditionally have never really been cruise ship builders. So
Let's see how China goes.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, China's the
South
other
Korea.
wild card for sure.
Yeah.
You see across the board expanding capacity. When you look at China Merchant Group, when you look at these other shipyards in China and what they're looking to do, incredibly aggressive plans on the table for both new building and for just cruise ship refits and in general. A good example is Singapore. You look at Singapore and you see the fact that they're expanding their shipyard in Tuas. They've moved out there away from the traditional shipyard that they have. They're building for the long term. They know ships are getting bigger. They know that expectations are higher. The projects are more complicated than they've ever been before. It's across the board. And Stephen, I think you really hit the nail on the head in regards to the strain on resources between the two. It's interesting because you're right, Trevor. 10 years from now, you're not going to get a ship for 10 years. If you go to mine to buy a ship right now, you're not going to get it 10 years from now. But what that does is that tells the leadership within the cruise lines, well, that means I need to go through and revitalize my hardware. Because if I really want to have a new ship, then the answer in the short term is to go through and refit the existing fleet. And I think that's what's driving such a massive push across all brands to continue with these revites. And they just keep getting bigger and bigger in scale and scope, and it's an
then
amazing
you get
phenomenon.
a new ship, like you said. We
Yeah.
did one recently, and it's essentially a new ship.
Yes.
And it's still a lot cheaper also than a completely new ship. But you don't have no choice.
George, you have anything to add?
No,
Okay.
not that hasn't been said.
Well, talking about capacity issues, there is also a squeeze on demand for materials. And Petu, if you can take this question on how is the industry managing, especially the IMO-approved materials?
The IMO itself is, it's been so much improved over the last, 5-10 years or so. What used to be, we used to do wood, veneer and stuff like that, and then it turned into laminates and just much more safe. But the techniques, what these suppliers do, laminates, all kind of printing techniques help a lot. But it's still capacity from the point of view that everybody's ordering. That is an issue that you sometimes, and it's about timing. But I have to say, to thank all the suppliers who supply for us. It used to be so much more limited, and now you have such a range of beautiful materials that you wouldn't know that they're not real. And they're lightweight, flammability, all the safety is there. So it's so much more easier. So it's credit to them to really answering to our needs and demands, and it's all the crazy designers. You want this and that, and they'll do it. So that's actually it's a very good way where we work with them now.
There's also a lot of vendors coming into this segment now that were traditionally more in hospitality. They're
Yeah.
coming more into
George.
cruise.
Your mic needs.
The mic is a little.
Yeah, it's
So anyway, there's a lot of
Now you're too loud.
yeah.
Yeah.
Revibration. There's a lot of more vendors that are now coming into our segment, very interested in how to do cruise and getting involved with cruise. They see this as an emerging market, which it is, and there's a lot of growth and excitement with that. The complications of IMO and even MED, as we're starting to deal with that in a lot of our flagships, has created the need for innovation, really, to start pushing the envelope. And I think that's what we're doing as we're working with our vendors, and we're pushing the envelope in terms of having them to evolve and create more product, different product. There's definitely a lot of a shortage of types of materials in terms of that allow us to be able to continue to emerge product and develop it.
And those new suppliers, they are much more interested in doing what you need to do for the IMO, for testing and think whether it's fabric or other flammable materials, where in the past they didn't see us as a big enough industry to be worthwhile to do the research and all that. But they're asking us questions like, how can we get in? How's the testing? What do we need to do? And we want to come in, so that's a great sign.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of misconceptions previously that new build, was going to the shipyard, and therefore anything that was being specified was being interpreted by the shipyard itself. So with the emergence of all the renovations that are going on in the existing product, there is more and more supply and demand. We're able to go out and bid product and be able to award product and purchase product that we're actually specifying. So there's a lot more support coming from the industry in that respect as well. So they're very eager because it has so much opportunity.
But it's nice to have a choice. We have a choice now. In the past, the
That's true,
choice was
yeah.
very limited.
Like just fabrics, you would have like few, and then that's it.
Right.
You would go to talk to fabric manufacturer, like, no, it's not enough. We don't want to go through the hassle.
Now you
Now
can get
everybody
anything,
has
yeah.
yeah, for sure.
I also think that the likes of yourself, Petu, from the design aspect, you and George, to that degree also, you're pushing the suppliers constantly for newer, more innovative materials, etc. So I think the industry is also driving the supply from the vendors.
Yeah, and we won't let them go if it's a manufacturer who says, well, it's not IMO yet, we're working. Like, well, then we're not going to specify it, because we don't want the trouble of doing something and it's not IMO. You have to reselect it anyway. And so, yeah, definitely. And they're into it. Like, they want to do it. So we're definitely hand in hand developing new stuff with them. And that's awesome.
Yeah, I kind of see cruise as being very much like where hotel was 15 years ago. It's emerging. 15 years ago, we were going out and getting residential products, having to go to the design showrooms and then interpret that. What's happening now is there's still a shortage, especially in the fabric field, in terms of selections. That everybody has the same books, they've got the same patterns, and everybody's using that. So as we continue to try to differentiate our brands and evolve our brands in terms of the differences between them, we're needing to look more and more into evolving that, and it's still more going to the customs that make those kind of the differences.
And I actually heard it was interesting, it was a new product that they were, and they had few samples, different colors or patterns. And they were saying that this is, for our hospitality, it was like, let's say 10 different. He said that we know that for the cruise industry, we need to have like 30 different choices. So it was kind of like reverse what people were thinking, like, no, you guys do more, like more different things than hospitality.
And the things that are developing become more based because they're going for a market segment as opposed to specific branding. So everybody's pretty much providing similar products. They're very background base type products that are in the books and readily available, or what we call in stock.
Yeah.
The only thing I would add is you're right. It's suppliers are more and more interested. I think all you have to do is show them the order book for new builds.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah, and
They can't believe it. It's like, you tell it's 100 ships in 2.5 years, like, no way.
Yeah.
But they've got to make the schedules, and that's so critical. We have to have the confidence they're going to make those schedules, because when the ship sails, we've missed that deadline.
Correct.
So it's very, very important in terms of meeting those deadlines.
But you're right, like MSC, we've got 11.5 billion euro in the order books coming up until 27. That's pretty attractive to supplier.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure.
And indeed, conferences like this with all the vendors coming in here, there's a lot of discussion and networking about innovation of materials, and so it's so important.
At last.
No, exactly.
True.
That's the
Yeah.
whole thing,
How
right?
long has this taken to happen?
That's the whole thing. Like, thanks for the guys who are doing it, Toby and the others. I mean, like, that's what we need. We need new things and see new materials and ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And these kind of things are where you can get them.
Because the guest experience is what we're all here to do. It's to create, and
Yes.
and some of the other forums that are out there at the moment are focusing on different areas of the guest experience. And this having this conference with Toby and Helen and so on, putting it together
Yeah.
is, as you know, it's been 15, 20 years in the making. It's about time. And
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
refreshing.
I would agree. Yeah.
There is a big debate about land-based design skills versus cruise ship industry. So George, if you can address that, is there a difference, and if so, what are the different skill sets that need to come?
Yeah, cruise ship is like a hotel or resort on steroids. So, you've got much larger areas to have to deal with. You're working with basically a vehicle of transportation that's constantly moving, vibrating. It has a lot of different challenges. Your spaces are smaller in comparison, so you're having to depend on the illusion of creating space. Designers need a larger breadth of experience because there's so much to a ship. You're doing everything from suites, standard, staterooms, balconies, to public areas, restaurants, bars, lounges, nightclubs, Broadway theaters, pool decks, and they all are connected by the sea. So all of these different areas start to require a different type of talent, knowledge, to be able to support and these different areas. At the same time, we're seeing that cruise ships are very much going very similar to hotels and resorts, and that they're becoming less thematic and a lot more experiential in terms of the branding and even some lifestyle. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah, and it's like everybody understands the movement in a way if you do like a chandelier or something, but it can actually go up as well. Like when you're trying to design it to look elegant and nice, there's a lot to think, and also then the ship itself is twisting and bending. Like if you actually see, it's kind of something hard to imagine just for the stone, for the floor, and simple things like that.
And just what we talked about, the materials and finishes and being able to meet those brand compliances and the
You have to have a different sort of creativity in a way.
Yes.
I think actually for any young designer out there that's thinking of a career, the cruise industry is a fantastic career for them to get into.
Definitely.
To what George was saying there, the sheer diversity of projects that you get to work on, from cabins to restaurants, I don't think in a standard practice you would actually get that much diversity. So I think anyone out there that is thinking of coming into the cruise industry as a designer, it's a fantastic career.
But bringing land-based onto the ships, to me it's like bringing the new players into the market. It's refreshing. It comes up with new ideas. It challenges us. It challenges the players that are in the industry already. It's very focused. We all know the cruise industry is like a little bit of a bubble. It's very incestuous. I've worked for 4 of the major companies out there, and a lot of us on the panel have changed companies as we've continued our careers. So it's sort of can be a little bit in a bubble, the way things work, and then by bringing in people from the outside to challenge us, I think that's what we need, and that's what we're doing. So if you look at back in the early 90s, cruising was 2 sittings. You'd go on a cruise ship, you'd have 2 sittings, you'd have to bribe the maitre d' if you didn't want to sit with 8 of people that you didn't know and you didn't like to change your tables. Today you don't have to do that. Today you've got alternate restaurants, you've got the main dining, you've got options. It's like a resort, as you're saying, you have options. resort.
Yeah. But unlike
Now
a
you have
resort,
options,
you've
let's
got a captured audience because they can't go off ship, so you've got this captured audience, and so you're having to start creating more diversity on the ships to start appeasing multiple tastes and creating different spaces so that when they're on board the ship, they've got different things, the guest experience, the entertainment. You're having to always step up the idea of entertaining them and keeping them busy. And
Like in the 90s and before that, the cruise industry was basically for 65-year-olds, between 65-year-olds and death. That was the way it worked. Now, it's a complete option. I talk to my friends and people a lot younger than me, and cruising is an option, and they do it, and they love it.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
And that didn't happen before. But now, because you have options, you have roller coasters, you have go-karts and things like that. Like there's exciting things happening that are keeping it going.
And if you think from itinerary point of view, if you're go, let's say in Europe, you go to Mediterranean, and I mean your hotel moves with you. You go to see Barcelona, Rome. I mean, it's very
Unpack once.
convenient.
I think also the ships themselves are becoming the destination.
Yeah.
With the variations that you have of opportunities, as you say, go-karts, water parks, the ship itself is a destination for people.
Yeah. What I would add as well is I think when you're talking about transitioning or bringing land as fresh new ideas to a cruise ship, I don't think there's been a better time in terms of a blank canvas for a lot of the new builds that are happening, especially the new general arrangements. And what's been pushed in terms of alternative design and layouts on these general arrangement plans for these ships, there's so many more opportunities to get such bigger wow factors architecturally inside the ships that you would never have seen on ships 10 years ago, especially 15 years ago. I mean, across the board between, I would say, any brand you see these key features that were unheard of 10, 15 years ago. And it's really phenomenal when you look at it.
And design in general, not only in cruising, but throughout the field, hospitality everywhere. It's just, I think it's more appreciated. If you look at like in Miami, the hotels 20 years ago they were building or apartments, they were so boring. Now you see, and they use a little bit of the space for the architecture and design. And now you see what they're coming up now. It's ships and land-based too. They're much more.
But it's
designed.
interesting seeing the industry mature as we go on. I always thought, like 10 years ago, I thought smaller ships must be an option. People want to go to, not everybody wants to go to the same place, which the larger ships do. They want to go to different destinations. So where the bigger ships are becoming a destination in themselves, the smaller ships are going to new destinations.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
and that's where, like if you've cruised a lot, when I worked for a previous luxury line, we had a lot of people that came on there. They were older and they loved it, and they would come every year and they would rebook year after year after year. But then if they had to go with their children and their grandchildren, then they would go to one of the larger contemporary lines, whether it's ours or Royal or whatever, because then that would suit that mode and what they wanted to do with the family and so on, and it made more sense. So this is where the industry's maturing, it's growing, and it's becoming more and more exciting, and it's becoming open to markets that wouldn't normally have looked at cruising.
That's true.
The future's bright.
Yeah, I think to Stephen's point, even airports, if you took like 30, 40 years ago, they were just moored to go to another place. Now airports are borrowing from the entertainment industry, and they are becoming destinations in themselves.
We're looking forward to America catching up, yes.
This is a little bit of, I'm asking you to stretch your projections a little bit in terms of the economy. What are your concerns? Is this expedition market sustainable? How long is it sustainable?
I think it's, well, with the order book we've got, I'm sure I hope it's sustainable. I don't see an issue with it. One thing working in the industry for so long, when the world goes through recessions or geopolitical challenges and so on, they usually last 6 months, 12 months, maybe 2 years. When you're building a new build, you're starting 4 years in advance. So if the company is large enough and you have the right support and so on, you ride out the economic challenges. So I don't see a problem. I think if you look at economies, if there's a downturn coming, the first people that sort of disappear or become unemployed are architects, because they're planning the future. So they're the first ones that seem to be retrenched or whatever, or things slow down. With us, that's not happening at all. Of course, we're just booming, and the capacity is just not there, and we're trying to find new capacity. But when you look around and the land-based and so on, it seems to be still very vibrant. So I think we're in good shape for the long term, unless Mr. Trump does something.
Well, I think
You
too,
never know that.
you know, cruising is considered a good value, and so during recession and downturn, you know, people are still vacationing. They're just vacationing differently. And I think that when they're looking for that value, they may not fly to the other continent to take a cruise ship, but they're certainly going to board one that's local. So I do think that people are still continue to travel even through those downtimes.
We look at 9/11 when that disaster happened. That the cruise industry obviously took a dive like everybody else did, but then all of a sudden, you're right, people still look for vacation. They're looking for a safe vacation. The ship you can move, so you move it into a safer environment if that's the case. So what we found, I was working at NCL at the time, that you were getting people that were driving from the West Coast over to the East Coast to get on a cruise and go on a vacation. So they still had to take it. So with ships, of course, we can move them wherever we need to. So
No, that was
that's
the thing
advantage.
right after 9/11, because we have a lot of different ports covered. So I think it was like 5 hours was the time from anywhere in U.S. that you could drive and take a cruise, and people didn't want to fly. So that was
Yeah.
it was a good help, let's say, during that tough time. But yeah,
George touched on it there. Talking with friends of mine who cruise, it's for value for money,
yes.
especially for families. It can't be beat with other forms of the travel industry as such. So, and you get to go to different ports. You get to see different things. So you're not going to one destination and you're staying there. It's for, as I say, friends of mine, they swear by it as a great value for money.
I think we're all pivoting towards the positive side of how our cruise industry will sustain an economic downturn. But I think what really happened if you have an economic downturn, I think the new builds are safe, right? New builds, the order books are full for the next 10 years. Those are locked in. That's not a question. I think the things that become questionable are the discretionary upgrades to the vessels and the implications for the refit market in general. I think that's what would take the hit if you have an economic downturn. I think that's the first thing to go. Architects, obviously, maybe you wouldn't bring in new projects. Maybe you would see more design build packages if you do have a sustained momentum for refit, where you wouldn't have fresh ideas or fresh architectural stuff. You would have your contractors go on board and do the typical design build where they just look to replicate an existing space. But at the end of the day, dry docks still need to happen. The ships are still required to dry dock. In the course of those dry docks, you're still taking out of service. You're not making revenue. So you want to get your maximum benefit for that out of service time. So there's still going to be some level of upgrades. Will they be the scale of what we're seeing? No, I don't think so. I don't think that would happen. But I do think that as soon as the economy recovered, if that were to happen, then you would again be right back in that same situation of having to harmonize your existing fleet with the new ships that are coming out, because ultimately things will come back.
You're right, because quite often you'll plan for it, and then if something is not, the economy's going down or something, you'll say, okay, I'll delay that till the next 2.5 years' time or whatever. So then you just do what I call a shower and a shave. Do the upholstery, the carpet.
There's another
and so on.
term for that, but let's not say it.
All right. We have some time, so I would like to open the panel to the audience. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and the microphone will come to you. Any questions?
Somebody back there.
Yes. Can we get microphone, please?
Oh.
So when you ask the question, please tell your name and your company. Thank you.
Brad Souffrant, American Flamecoat. What could you guys go over the projections over the next 5 years and 10-year plan again on new ship builds?
I think you gave some numbers, didn't you?
Oh, you're referring to the numbers on ships on order? Yeah, currently through to 2027 is 124 on order. I think the value was 68 billion for the order book.
Any other questions?
There's somebody in the back there.
Back there.
You gotta throw the mic far.
How do you see that?
Hello. Stephanie Deshay is with Architects Textiles. Hi, George. Hi, Petu.
Hi.
So they say that wellness tourism is the fastest growing industry right now. And I'm wondering if the cruise industry is also, I mean, the fastest growing market segment, I guess is what I meant to say. And I'm wondering if the cruise industry is trying to capitalize on any of that.
For sure. I mean, the spa, wellness, those programs and the way they are programmed, they're constantly evolving as they're on the land base. So that's definitely, and also like we've talked about different generations, millennials and Gen Z and stuff like that. So it's all evolving, and what cruise lines offer are reacting to that and trying to what the guests want. So that's.
But I think you'll find that with the wellness, with MSC, it's a big focus. We have a department which is growing exponentially on that, and you'll see the importance always equates to the square meters. So the square meters of what we have in the spa and the wellness and so on is growing, and it's also going into the cabins and how you do the cabins and that cabins and suites as well, and outdoor areas. So it's very important. It's one of the major factors of the future for sure.
And food as well, like the whole
Food.
package to go with that.
So we're, my design team, we talk about this quite a bit. And we've been actually working with our vendors and discussing the ideas of wellness and how do we bring in that into, especially into the textiles areas of interest that we're starting to look at, not only hospitality products, but healthcare products as it starts to connect into cruise. We have so many people within a small space. I think it's very critical. So we're challenging them to start looking at antimicrobial additions. We're starting to look at different finishes that actually has these kind of wellness type finishes and completions. They also sustainability. We're also talking sustainability and what products that are out there that are sustainable, recyclable, and definitely has a place that's very dear to our hearts in terms of sustainability and how we support that and bringing that into cruise. I don't think that that's something that traditionally in the past has been exercised that we see so much in hotel and resort work. So, yeah, I think it's very important.
I think it's also you have on the wellness side, there is a company out there trying to get a start going of a lifestyle cruise, Blue Ocean Voyages or something I think it's called, and it's all based around wellness and health and fitness, the whole theme of the ship. Yeah.
There's one here, and then we'll go there.
Hi guys, John Ingleton from Cruise and Ferry Interiors. I was interested to hear that a number of you have got degrees in project management, process management, and there are dozens of different methodologies that you probably studied doing your degrees. Which do you follow now in your current jobs? Six Sigma, Lean, any particular one, or have you made up a brand of all of your own?
What I could say in terms of project management, you mentioned Lean. I think that's something that I think everybody would agree that Royal kind of pioneered in terms of refurbishment. From that side, certainly in respect to cabin refurbishment, that you've seen incredible improvements in terms of the ability to be able to execute massive, large-scale cabin refurbishments in just increasingly shrinking periods of time. I believe that's become the standard. We've adopted that over at NCL. We use Lean refurbishment when it comes to cabins. And we've found it allows us to cut down on our dry dock time immensely. I would say that's something that's somewhat beneficial for public areas, depending on the contractors and the outfitters that you speak to. Some of them find it helpful. Some of them find it a bit overburdensome. But certainly, I would say that lean in particular has been a huge advantage for the industry as a whole in terms of the improvement.
Yeah. The Six Sigmas of the industry, etc., they don't really equate and relate to the cruise industry per se. A lot of those ones are actually very centered on a particular industry. So therefore, they don't roll over for us just as easy. Parts of it possibly, but as a...
You have to customize.
Yes.
All the time.
Exactly, yes.
We had a question there.
Hello, Rosana Sandoval Gallardo, somos un Only One Swire. You were talking about to open the door for new vendors in different areas and different products. Each one of your companies has a different way, I suppose, to make it the process successfully for your vendors. What is that in each one of your companies? Because I assume each one of you has different requirements according to your own projects, right? So, like you were talking wellness and everything, how a new person, a new vendor, a new product can approach you and how they can pass through the IMO and get to the shipyard successfully.
No, we're always looking at new resources. We have to. We definitely have a history of and good relationships with existing manufacturers, but I don't think that they're able to supply everything that we're looking to do. As we try to evolve the brand and the product, we're wanting to also look at, when we think about innovation in terms of what does that mean, it's too easy to go back to like, but then you never evolve the brand and it doesn't have that movement. So I think we're always looking and researching new products and materials. We're starting to actually start partnering with our other brand partners as well within our organizations, and we're starting to compare lists and look at different vendors. And we're actually, we open it up and then we start to pare it down because we start looking and trying to look at the quantities in terms of the buyouts and where we can find the right price within our corporate structures.
As far as coming in, I think it's just even these kind of events are good. Just go meet and that's the start. There's no like official format, let's say. We always see new vendors daily, basically, and then we try to help. But as far as IMO or things like that, and kind of guide them, and we're always welcome. We always want something new products and innovative. So that's it's never not liked, let's say. We welcome everybody.
If you have a new idea and a new product, it's very. We all want to talk to you but if you're doing the same product that everybody else is doing, but you're doing your version of it, it's a lot harder to break in because of the time to get all the IMO certification, etc., etc. But if there's something new, of course, I think every one of us here would be very happy to talk to you and guide you, as you said, guide you through the process.
Wow us.
Yeah.
Show us something cool and we'll go through.
There's one there at the corner, and then we'll come.
I need to add one more thing, though. I have to ask vendors to do your homework. Somebody come to me and they just want us to tell them how to do it, and they want us to walk it through the process. At least know what IMO is and what that means, or NED. Just in respect, I think that's something I would have to ask vendors. We're definitely going to give you our time, but be respectful for that time.
Yeah, this is Dallas Chapman with Kravick Contract. Excellent panel. I've learned actually a lot listening to all of you. But when you look at the robustness of the industry that we're in, and all the new builds on the docket, certainly through 2027, what headwinds do you see for the industry? What sort of red flags are keeping you up at night as the industry progresses at such a rapid pace?
Talent. resources. That's the big thing, because we're all chasing the same resources, same people. That's a major problem. I think that's probably the biggest. My company, for example, we're looking at, but I was told, around 50 to 60,000 over the next 10 years. That's a lot of trained people that you need to find, which is very difficult. So you have to invest in that.
Yeah. I think that also runs through to not just the crew for the vessels, but also personnel for the head offices.
Absolutely.
Again, we're all chasing the same people. So there's a limitation there. But to your point of we are a small industry and we have limited resources. And when we're at a boom time as we are now, finding people is extremely difficult. Quality people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think everybody's stretched. I think you see people stretched from, as Stephen said, the head office, as well as the crew, as well as the architects, the outfitters. It's not uncommon to go into refits now and to talk to guys that have spaces, and it can be their perhaps first or second dry dock, and they have an experienced lead who's over top of them. But it's with the way that projects are now and how incredibly aggressive they are, to have an inexperienced person at the helm of a space is it just adds to the risk profile, and it's a challenge that I don't think anybody has found a solution for. It's a race to what it's done to some degree is it's kind of pushed among the cruise lines. It's pushed the lead times out of how quickly you want to lock in companies and architects and the talent you need to execute the projects. There's only so much that can be done for that, and then ultimately everybody's going to have a mix. And obviously, you want to build bullpens. You want to grow the talent organically. Everybody wants to do that, but it's in this kind of environment. It's kind of throwing people into the wolves' den, so to speak, in a lot of these projects, and it's going to have repercussions at some stage. Right now, we're managing, but I would say it's fragile.
Yes.
Yeah, it's moving fast. It's moving very quickly, and finding talent has been a challenge for us.
For sure. And it's not just a challenge for the cruise lines. The outfitting groups themselves, they have a challenge finding people that are able to, Colin's point, manage projects. Again, we're all trying to feed off of the same pool, and it is a major challenge. I know at Royal, where I've been working recently, they are on a massive recruitment drive in order to keep up with the demand, and it's hard to attract people.
Thank you. We have one last question.
Hi, I'm with AMBA. I do heated towel rails, towel warmers, also for the hotel industry. I was wondering, what is your favorite innovations? I go back to that subject of innovations. What are your favorite ones that have come up in ships recently and in cruise lines that not only is good for the guest comfort, but also saves an operational cost?
Sleeper sofa. It sounds pretty basic, but it's pretty. It's what we're most excited about right now, and purchasing a lot of them. We just launched a luxury bed program, and as we look to start filling those cabins from 2 to 4 heads, we start looking at your sleeper sofas and the secondary, or really the tertiary and sleeping areas, and what is that, and then how does that start to equate to the standard mattress, because it's not always perceived as being luxury. So finding that product and being able to implement that is what we're doing currently.
And LED lighting is something that has, I mean, it changed everywhere, but like for us, you used to do RGB, the color changing, and you would have to have 3 neon tubes. So for like a light cove, you needed this much space. Now you have one little thing. So it's just, it's an added thing you can put anywhere. Just be careful you don't put it too much, but that's a simple little thing in a way that has had a tremendous effect from design point of view. Totally awesome.
I totally agree.
I think technology overall has been massive.
LED, all the things
LED,
like that.
everything. We've just introduced a product called Zoe in our cabins, where it's like an Alexa, but it's called Zoe, and that is something new for the guest to be able to use and link into. they can ask her questions and it can tell them what to do instead of having to go through a compendium or look on the TV screen at the right channel. They can just ask the question like you do at home with Alexa.
And just the
It's fun.
TV itself, like in the cabin, which is always very confined, used to have like a big, deep thing for the TV, and now it's on the wall. Same
That's a
like
problem for refurbishment when you've got the little
Oh no, you got the
TVs
cabinet
and then
there, and you have a flat
42
screen.
inch,
Yeah, it's true. But then, like a facial recognition, like we have this photo area, and when guests are going through, all the screens change to show their photos. Just it recognizes, and it's something that when they do it first time, like, what the hell? What's going on here?
They're tracking me.
Yeah, exactly. You can opt out if you don't want to do it, but still there.
We can squeeze in one last question from that gentleman, and we'll keep the answers brief.
There's somebody back there.
Good day. Hector Arroyo from New York. I'm a new maritime historian. If the cruise ships are becoming destinations in their own right, as you've mentioned, why not reintroduce cruises to nowhere? In the same way this would serve to introduce new passengers into the cruise industry.
That's a very interesting question. I really haven't even thought about it. We used to do that when the ship was delivered, and you did like a 2-3 day VIP cruise to nowhere, and yeah, that's interesting. You could just go and float around. You don't burn fuel. But I don't know how long you can do that when the guest. I mean, when you go on like a sea trial, and the ship is doing all kind of things, and then 2 days later you look and you're still in the same spot. So it's like we didn't even move. But it's an interesting thought.
I think it's maybe not for this panel, for a marketing panel.
Yes.
It's definitely an option. It all comes down to the marketing and whether they think they can make a return on it.
I think you're going to have to look at the brand too, because Princess brand is based on destination. So that is our primary market, is the destination. So I think it depends on what your philosophies are and what your business models are in terms of what you're looking to accomplish.
I think it's the ship as well, right? I mean, everybody knows that certain ships you want to have 5 or 7 day itineraries, and then some of the other ships you do the weekend cruises and the others. A 2 or 3 day cruise to nowhere would be, again, I think that's definitely a question for a different audience or a different panel for sure, focused on the right revenue yields and marketing mix between it. Certainly, I'm not qualified to talk on that.
We would build it for them once they come up with it. But yeah.
Very happy to.
Well, with that exciting news, we'll complete this panel discussion. I'm sure we'll have more spirited discussions later, so please enjoy the rest of the conference, and let's give the panel members one big round of applause. Thank you.